Good afternoon, friends. Welcome back to the second part of this video, which talks about the communication and the developing communication skills. So in the last video, we saw how the different mass media and other parts of the organizational and intrapersonal communication can set up a kind of a scenario in which communication for student teacher can continue. So in this part of the video, which is the concluding part of this series, we will talk about the ways and means of developing the communication skills and how the two-way communication and other ways of motivating lead to certain ways in which the communication process is most effective. And we will also talk about the general barriers of communication and how to address those issues. So as you know, so you are student teachers. So you are training to become teachers. So if you want to be a good and effective teacher, it is more than communication. Communication is there, but along with that, there is some kind of an extra thing that need to be added to it. So what is that extra thing? It is not enough for the student to merely repeat the same word or same set of sentences that are conveyed to him. The teacher's concern is that the student should recognize the word and understand the meaning, use it appropriately with the correct spellings in future occasions, and true learning can happen only when the act of communication is made into a permanent set of meaningful additions to a student's communication skills. So therefore, there are many factors that may be considered for effective communication skills. One is to establish a two-way communication. A two-way communication instead of one-way communication is always needed for an effective way to set across what you want to convey. The communication has a built-in system of feedback, and that ensures that further information, clarification, etc. are provided whenever needed, so that whoever is communicating can modulate the way in which the communication takes place. Now, the receiver of the communication gets the opportunities to understand the message in a better way, and therefore if they send feedback to the teacher can modulate and modify his or her behavior in such a way that the students get much more understanding of the system. Now, the second aspect of communication is what is known as a clarity. So, the communication process must be clear enough, as this has been found to be a determining factor in which effective communication can take place. Now, when some thought is expressed in language and transmitted in a way that is comprehended by the receiver, by the student. So, teacher says something and the receiver or the student receives something. It can be effective only when the 100% message goes across. But that is the ultimate scenario, and like the ideal scenario that needs to be done. So the clarity requires some kind of approach to language familiarity and language patterns, both at the grammatical level and as well as at the level of the learner and the learning patterns. So the third one is the development of a motivational mechanism, in which the learners cannot listen or read or write or understand until and unless they are motivated enough, they are concentrating on the work, and if they are sticking to the needs of the attention of the communication process, or whatever is being communicated, there are certain barriers of communication might arise. So if they are not paying any attention to it, so a loss in transmission or poor attention takes place. Now we can use this mechanism this part to communicate certain aspects of motivation to the student by communicating clearly, and therefore we can make use of certain instructional technologies and teaching technologies that can be more effective in communicating the classroom teaching. So therefore sometimes in the classroom we use the blackboard or the whiteboard just for this purpose. And then fifthly, you have teaching strategies and skills which must be fully exploited, must be fully made functional and operational for the communication to inspire and be pragmatic at the level of the student. Now, there are certain barriers to the communication process itself. So, what are they? So, the quality and effectiveness of the process of communication is affected by how well the transmission of the message is taking place. So, if it is favorable, then it's 100% a message goes across. If it is not favorable or there is an adverse presence of some kind of a noise or some other intervening factors or some kind of things that are lying between the source of the communication and the receiver of the communication. So these variables all interact and according to their nature help or obstruct the path of communication, therefore modulating the effectiveness of the communication. Now, there are certain internal barriers of communication like poor physical health or poor background in terms of learning and general knowledge, not doing the background readings, poor mental health or improper physiological and psychological makeup that might affect certain prejudices in attentions, feeding, feelings of insecurity, anxiety, depression. So these are certain learner factors that are there which make the communication process dissatisfactory, and it can be a barrier to the communication. Sometimes external barriers to the communication are important because sometimes noise and other environmental factors can induce these communication process to be not so 100% effective. So it can lead to certain kind of sometimes physical discomfort can contribute to this, or some improper functioning of the communication channels. Say for example, if you have a crappy internet connection, so this video may not be going through properly to you, so that can be an external barrier to the communication process. And so the lack of proper motivation also kind of hampers the communication. So in sum, we can say that the communication plays a very effective and essential role to any formal or informal learning process or teaching learning process. And the process of interpersonal communication is both an art and a science, and the teachers should do several things to take the message 100% across. So they can be young and old growing minds in which the teacher's ideas are supposed to generate some kind of a thought process, and therefore developing communication skills in both the students as well as the teachers have to be the basic concern of the student teachers, and therefore in this way they can provide ways and means to improving and developing the skills.